If you found yourself in Fremont County early June of last year, you might recall the flooding that drew over 40 agencies and groups to Lander, Hudson, and Euclid.
The volunteer effort here was great. There was over 40,000 volunteer hours that were booked, we were logged, and that's not counting the ones that were never captured. There is a lot of incident management information and qualified personnel in Fremont County that came together. We had not only our local folk, our emergency management people, our local emergency planning committee folks. We were able to bring in a lot of people that we worked with before, form our team, and it was a local team. Basically, we did bring in some of our friends and cooperators from outside that we've worked with before. It was a great effort on everybody's part. We all worked well together, and it came together, and we felt things were done pretty well.
Although emergency response gets increasingly better, flooding is the leading cause of property loss from natural disaster in this country. 100 years ago, the benefits of placing a ranch or even a town in the floodplain may have outweighed the risks, but common sense today might suggest otherwise. Congress is now working to address the burden taxpayers have shared in the National Insurance Program since 2005. That's when the program went nearly $18 billion in debt in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. While hurricanes are not the worry of Wyoming, our small towns have grown along the shores of rivers, and floodplains are often favored by new development.
Rivers are very unpredictable. They can cut and erode areas that you thought were stable, and they can transport sediment to other areas that you thought weren't going to be able to transport. They can make their own channels. Like we saw in Fremont County last year, they can take out man-made structures with no problems. It's all about the power of water.
Fremont County's flood last year was a foot under the 100-year event level, and Solly Cadman says it was just a splash compared to what he saw in 1963 when he made this film. Now, 1963 was just one of several wet cycles over the past century, but now there's another factor that scientists think may increase the likelihood of flood events in Wyoming.
Well, the bark beetle is taking out the canopy or the tree cover in the basins. So we're figuring, and this collaborate with other scientists in Wyoming, that if you take away your interception capability and the evapotranspiration capability that these trees provide, you're going to have higher flows earlier, and you're going to have more or higher quantity of flows.
So what were the weather conditions that led to last year's flood? And what are we looking at for this year?
The biggest thing that really happened last year was we had a very wet and cool May. We started off with a large snowstorm around the second week of May, packed a lot of snowpack into the southern Wind River mountains, and then that snowpack stayed around through the rest of the month largely, with just a cool month. Very early in June we warmed up quickly, several days of just enough warm weather to start melting that water, and it all came down at one time. This year really is going to depend on where you are in the state. At the southern Wind River range, actually right now the snowpack, while good, isn't anywhere near what we saw last year. Where elsewhere around the state, we're now 150, 60, and 70% of normal. So the snowpack has been phenomenal, I guess would be the best word to maybe use.
The state has seen successful runoff of as much as 300% snowpack in the past. But as we are experiencing yet another relatively cool spring, a number of towns around the state are preparing for the worst.
At this stage, what I call flooding potential is the highest for the North Platte, for the Laramie, for the Bear, and we have a moderate to high risk for the Wind River Basin, and for areas like Clear Creek and Buffalo, and small areas maybe in the Upper Green near LaBarge.
We'd love to see the snowpack come off bit by bit. So, a couple of days of warm weather to get some snow melt going, but cool temperatures still at night so that it slows overnight. And then maybe a stretch of some cooler weather so that water can make its way through the system and then start it again several days later. That's ideal, and usually that's something what we would see in the spring months. We do get usually some warm temperatures where we melt a little bit here and a little bit more and a little bit more. The later we wait into the season, the better the likelihood that when we finally do warm up, we're plenty warm enough to start melting, and we may stay warm for several days at a time, so it may come down in a very quick onslaught rather than bit by bit.